Hello, hello everyone. Humans and AIs as well. Not sure when this joke will go old, but you need to be kind to AIs. You never know what's gonna happen. So saying hi to them as well is always good. It's good to see some faces on the screen. And while we wait for a few more people to join, there's a question on the screen, and the question reads, when you think about your organization's leaders, what's one word you'd use to describe them right now? So feel free to just use the chat. Brianna says ineffective. We're starting strong, that's for sure. But thank you for being very quick, Rihanna. Um, while inconsistent, okay. I already feel like there was no need for you to join this webinar because you already know the results, the results of our research. Um, Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lavinia from Offbeat. I am joining from Bucharest, Romania, for very, very cold and not so nice Bucharest, Romania today. And Offbeat is this learning space dedicated to L&D professionals. And today we're going to talk about leadership development. And the reason we're going to talk about leadership development is because if we look at the hierarchy of worries of L&Ds or things that keep us up at night, um, for most of us, like AI is very, very high in the hierarchy, and then there's leadership development, right? And since everybody else was talking about AI, we said, okay, what if we were to talk about leadership development? And thank you so much for continuing to write in the chat. What else? Let's see what other responses we got. Depleted, overwhelmed again, focus on results, but sometimes lack of human focus, over solicited, selfish. And we have a few people calling from Arizona and France and from India. We're a very global community. And it's very, very nice to see that. Now, I have a few things to share with you. But before I do so, I just wanted to say that the chat is open to you at all times. I mean, I definitely have a few insights to share, but I think there's how many of us here? Over 40 people here. And I think there's so much that we can learn from each other. So don't hesitate to write in the chat at any point. If you want to add something to the conversation or if you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your virtual hand, not your physical hand because I won't see you. But if you raise your virtual hand, I'm gonna see you and I'm gonna make sure to give you the mic so you can ask your question and or make your point. If you cannot go off mute, feel free to share your question in the chat and I will make sure to come to it and yeah, make sure that we cover your worries and your thoughts. Okay? Um, let's go. So, when we read about leadership development, one of the things that we hear a lot is that everybody is trying to move very fast because there are so many changes that we need to adapt to and our organizations need to adapt to. But it does also feel that leaders, just like everybody else, but leaders specifically, are burned out, they are overwhelmed, they do need more support. And the question is why? Why do they need more support? Because at the same time, if we look at the investment that we're making in leadership development across all target groups that we have in L&D, for sure leaders receive the most investment, right? So why is it that we invest so much in them, but at the same time, they feel like all the bad things, right? So it does feel like we're trying to move fast, but sometimes it feels like we're kind of moving in a circle and not necessarily moving forward. So that's the first thing that we were wondering. And because we started doing a bit more research in Offbeat, we decided to make leadership the center of our focus during summer. And we did research in two ways. First of all, we compiled like this very long survey. If you answered it, you might know this, trying to explore leadership development from all angles. And we had it open for about 2 months and a half. And then we also had some interviews with some of our research survey responders to make sure that we also have the qualitative insights from L&Ds, right? And why L&Ds? Because that's part of our work, and we have a very good overview. We're very connected to like the architecture of the organization. We do the work of supporting leaders alongside other peers from our people departments. But since we have mostly L&Ds in our network, we thought this is a really good opportunity to see what they think about leadership. And we had three main goals with our research. The first one is to understand how exactly we are supporting our leaders at the moment in 2025. The second one was to make sure that we provide benchmark to our community members, because one of the things that you basically and our other community members are requesting are real insights. So we talk less theory and we talk more about the practices that people are actually employing in our organizations, including in leadership development. And we knew that if we had this research, people could read it and they could see how they're doing against different numbers and also against different qualitative practices. And finally, the last thing we had in mind was that we might identify some gaps, and oh boy, we did, to bring to our community and discuss it. Okay, and now before I move forward, I'm really curious, and if you can again write in the chat, just yes, no. Did you know about the research before we started planning the event and promoting this webinar? No, 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 no. Okay, this is very good for us to know so that next year we also reach you and gain even more insights. Oh my God, this is insane. Nobody said said yes. Okay, then you will be the beneficiaries of the insights of the research, and we'll make sure to for our next research to come back to you so that you can share your practices as well. I'm really curious to see though if you find any of what I'm going to talk about relatable to your own situation, right? So again, just a quick reminder, don't forget you can always raise your virtual hand and you can write in the chat if you have any comments, okay? I'm going to share two things in the next 40 minutes or so. The first thing is 5 of the most interesting things that we learned in the research. Then we're going to have a bit of a discussion. And then at the end, we're going to share 4 recommendations that we have for the future. It can be for 2026 or even further if you're planning your strategies for a few years ahead, right? So let's go into the findings. It was really hard to choose only 5, but let's see how we did. Okay, I told you that we tried to explore how L&Ds see leadership and leadership development from as many angles as possible. And one of the questions we asked was about how L&Ds are perceiving their leaders' performance, just like we did at the beginning of this chat. And the response was Along the lines of sad and worrying. We tried to look at the number. We tried to see, NPS and do averages, and then look at the numbers based on like company size, based on industry. I can tell you that it looked bad in any way that we tried to look at it. VB, yes, you will receive the slides after the webinar. Okay. But then we said, okay, like this is just a number. Let's see, are there any other insights that we can tie to this number? And we had two qualitative questions. One was about, very similar to the question we had at the beginning of the webinar, about people, they could choose from a list of attributes for leaders. And the other one was about the biggest challenges that leaders are perceiving, that L&Ds are perceiving that leaders have, right? And what I can tell you from that part was that, first of all, very few L&Ds were described their leaders as being either inspiring or empowering. So these were the main like good attributes that we had in the list, and very few L&Ds thought their leaders are like that. Then what else we heard was that leaders don't feel like very strategic in the way that they do their work. It feels like they're mostly fighting to to just do the work, just do always, never stop for reflection, never stop for thinking how things one action might affect other areas of the organization. So they don't feel truly strategic. And also, it's hard for them to give direction because they're not that strategic. It's hard for them to give direction to their teams. And two other things that we found was that leadership is truly inconsistent across levels and across departments. So if there was one thing that was consistent, was how inconsistent leaders are. So you might have leaders that are very inspiring, but then you might also have leaders that are micromanagers and who are not very good strategic professionals. And then very few L&Ds, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that very few L&Ds mentioned that their leaders are micromanaging their teams, which again was very interesting. Then when it comes to the challenges that leaders have, the first and biggest thing that came out was that that leaders are overwhelmed. And I think I saw even some of you mentioning that leaders do seem overwhelmed. And also very related to this was the fact that they find it hard to manage the work that they do, and time management definitely came around as a top issue. And in our qualitative interviews, we found something very, very interesting and something we kind of already knew, which is the fact that the role of the leader is very, very poorly designed. Because what happens when you step into the role of the leader is that you still have some operational things left to do, and then the leadership tasks are kind of thrown on top of that. And leaders have an identity struggle between, okay, what do I need to do? Do I need to do my work very well, or do I need to manage this team, right? And then on top of that, challenges related to difficult conversations, coaching, developing their team also came around very, very predominantly. Okay, so this was like our first biggest insight. Brianna says, this is why my personal definition of leadership is to build the capacity for leadership within others, management is a different definition. Brianna, if you can give us a bit more insight into that, that's a really interesting point. And while you do that, I'm going to move forward. The second thing that we found striking was the fact that almost 50% of L&Ds reported that leadership performance is not measured at all in their companies. And I can tell you a bit of how leaders' performances are measured, and that's through employee engagement results, through what people call management effectiveness scores, through team performance metrics, through 360 feedback results, through upward feedback from team members, and then through behavioral change surveys or research, which was the least mentioned tactic. But the reality is that we're not measuring the performance of our leaders as much as we could. And I'm curious, I'm going to just throw this question to the crowd. Are you measuring the performance of your leaders in any way? And you can just, again, write in the chat. I'm going to make sure to read your comments out loud. Or do you even find like these tactics relatable to your situation, like engagement scores, 360 feedback, um, pre and post surveys before and after your leadership development programs? Do any of these sound like something that you're doing in your company? My last job, yes, but none of the other places I worked ever did. And then they acted surprised each year when they did the engagement survey that people weren't happy. Yeah, no one feels psychologically safe to give real feedback to our leadership team, so people end up lying in surveys. Oh, that's tough. No, and we have our end of year reviews coming up very soon. I'm wondering if it's something that is simple and easy to implement in a short period of time. No, only managing it according to the area department's results, if it is achieved or not. We have done some post-program evaluations about behavior and manager engagement, some other items. This year was our first time, so still learning. Crystal, I would say good for you. I mean, again, as we can see, like it's very tough to measure, but I think one of the things that we've seen some L&D teams doing was just looking at the data that they already have available. So things like engagement scores, churn rates, exit qualitative data from their exit interviews, 360 feedback, and just trying to pull all of this data together so that each leader at least gets an overview out of these results. But to one of your points here, I think you do need to trust the data that comes from people. If psychological safety is a problem, for sure that needs to be addressed first. Jeff is saying only the best leaders seem to get feedback and do something with it on their own. Yeah, that's also very, very true. Okay. I will also we will share the chat, by the way, as well, so that you can see some practices from our peers here. Now move forward. Okay, something else that was really interesting. We looked very deeply at leadership development programs, so how they are structured, what formats do L&Ds use, what topics do L&Ds choose to put on the table when it comes to leadership development. And one of the questions that we kind of threw in there was if leaders are designing or co-designing their own programs with the L&D team. And I don't even know how to say this. It wasn't surprising to see that most L&Ds don't receive any input from their leaders on, what are the best formats? What topics should we choose? Is there anyone you would like to talk to? Would you like to have more or less content? Would you prefer to have this asynchronously or synchronously, live or online? So there's no input from leaders when it comes to this. Most L&Ds do the traditional surveys or needs assessment interviews. So these were the top two most reported ways of gathering input from leaders. What we can share from, again, stories we've heard from other L&Ds is that you can come up with the first draft of your design for your leadership development program, and you can just bring it to the table of leaders. Just gather, those people, I think Jeff mentioned, those people that are very willing to engage in development, and just show them what you designed and co-create it with them. Ask them, like, how does this feel? Is there anything that you would add? Is there anything that doesn't make sense at all? And I wouldn't even put and again, just from what others have said, I wouldn't even put a lot of time in designing the draft on my own. I would just create a skeleton and put it on the table. And you can go as low as having a 1 hour meeting with them, or as high as having a hackathon with them, which is again something we've seen in our community. The best time that leadership development changed behavior en masse was when I had a governance board from half of the executives. This is also something we've heard consistently, both in our community and through this research. One of the most important things to have is sponsorship. And I mean, this is the most important thing to have in any change management program and in any behavioral change program, right? Having sponsorship from senior leaders in your organization. But we also know that's not very easy to get. Okay. The next thing that we learned, again, I told you that we asked about formats. The first three formats that came on top were in-person sessions, coaching, and peer exchange. And the fourth one, if I'm not mistaken, was like virtual sessions, right? What was interesting in our qualitative research, in the interviews that we did with community members, was that they also perceived these as the most effective ones. Also, peer learning groups seem to be the harder to set up. So people do say, hey, I join whatever session. It can be an in-person, workshop. It can be whatever session you set up out there. People do say that the most important thing for them is to catch up with other leaders in the organization, or even in their network. But when it comes to these peer learning groups that are void of content, and their purpose is mainly to put leaders together so they discuss their challenges, they seem to be really hard to crack. Again, they're seen as very effective, but also very hard to crack. One other thing that I would mention when it comes to formats is that we are experimenting quite a lot, like quite a lot, with asynchronous nudges, with LinkedIn Learning, with Udemy, with journaling, with mentoring, with all sorts of formats. I think what came out for me at the top is this idea of choosing the 20% that delivers the most value to your organization instead of trying to do many things at once and realizing that maybe your resources and hence your impact is scattered across multiple formats. But again, if there's something to take away from this, in-person sessions, virtual sessions, coaching, peer learning groups seem to be both the most used and the ones that are seen the most effective. Um, ooh, and lots of things coming in the chat. We found coaching buddies really effective to complement live programs. That's such a good point, Ali. Often these relationships continue beyond the program, give them some foundational coaching skills, and let them experiment with each other in a safe peer-to-peer environment. 100%. When we do this, we hear about how they haven't worked in the past. I think it takes a strong coach, facilitation, and the structure to make them successful equally. You need participants who want to be there and believe that change is actually possible. That's such a good point, Rachel. So we recently did a case study with someone from our community. I'm not sure if Scott is here. But he made peer learning groups work in his organization. And he shared a couple of things that he did. The first one was facilitating the conversations. I think it's not good to assume that leaders can just go ahead and run with it, even after one or two sessions. I do think they need good facilitation skills. The second thing is that he wanted to make sure that there's always like a cheerleader in the group for the peer learning group so that, they're the ones who are very excited about this and promote the initiative. And the third thing, he comes from a smaller organization like a startup/scale-up, and he did get founders into these peer learning groups. So if you're in a startup or a scale-up, I think that's such a good signal for other leaders to join, just because they might not always get to hear experiences from more senior leaders than theirs. And then Saad says peer learning sessions are the most powerful where they bring a real-time challenge. Getting different perspectives on how others would handle the same situation is what they find valuable, but they are curated skillfully by a facilitator, a coach, tops up any blind spots where peers don't have the answer. Yes, 100%. Okay. And then the last thing that we learned, we asked quite a lot about how L&Ds are measuring their leadership development efforts. Two of the main questions were like how impactful they feel like their leadership development programs are, and secondly, how exactly they're measuring these leadership development programs. I think our biggest shock was to learn that only a bit below 18% of L&Ds think that their leadership development programs are very impactful. What I can tell you is that 50% of them feel that they are somewhat impactful. So it's kind of like near miss thing. And there's also, I think 40% of people said that they are not measuring their leadership development programs in any way. Now, in terms of how exactly they're measuring these programs, the thing that came out on top was post-session surveys. I think this is the most common thing that we're using in general in L&D. Then some of the others are manager feedback and again, engagement survey results. Very sad for me, and I guess for you as well, it's completion rates, unfortunately. Pre and post program self-assessments, 360 feedback, and or 180 feedback as well. So these are the top ways of measuring leadership development programs, not leaders' performance, which we see as, and they are quite different. And now I'm gonna throw the question to you. I'm curious, like, how impactful do you feel your leadership development efforts are. And it can be, again, from very impactful, somewhat impactful, not that impactful. You can go ahead and just write in the chat. And I'm also gonna stop here because I talked for quite a while. And I wanted to see if you have any questions about what I said so far. You can, again, just raise your virtual hand. Otherwise, I won't be able to see you, or just write the question in the chat, or any other thoughts that you have. And thank you so much for contributing so far. That's really, really nice to see. I will leave you a second here. Thank you, Krista.
I have a question,
Go ahead.
Lavinia.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hi, for sharing. My question will be related to behavioral change tracking.
Mhm.
Do you have any insights from the survey and report, like around, because what I'm doing now, and it's an experiment, I'm sending the survey to the managers who completed the program 3 months ago.
Mhm.
Some completed 6 months ago. And the idea of the survey is to identify by asking only them for now, like if they're applying what they've learned, how they're applying it, if they see the impact, if their behavior has changed somehow, and etc. So, but I have a lot of like doubts in my head saying me that okay, they're gonna just lie to me, or like they're gonna tell me whatever, because it's so difficult to actually track and be aware that, oh, actually I started applying this or that,
Mhm.
but so my question is, like, if you have any insights around this type of surveys, like post assessments, and does it make any sense to do this, because it doesn't require so much time from my side. However, like, it's still something that I hope for and demonstrate also to like C-level, as
Yeah,
the
yeah,
impact.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah. So again, I'm gonna share what I heard one L&D team doing. First of all, they focused on a very concrete behavior. So it wasn't measuring all the behaviors that their leaders should have changed, because we also have this impression that, we put time management and feedback and communication and strategy and all of these things, and hoping that they will pick up on any of them. But they did choose to focus for I think it was 3 months, 2 or 3 months, on a specific behavior. And then what they did, to answer your question about surveys, was that they sent, before they started the program, they sent a survey with a couple of questions that were related to that behavior. And they also added in the questions, I don't know like how scientists call this, but basically to verify, I'm missing the word now, but to verify if the way that they answered before was really true or not. So let's say that you're asking, I reflect every day. That's one statement that they need you know, to respond to. And then you ask the question in a different way, so that you see exactly, how true the behavior is or not. So they did it at the beginning, and then after the program ended, they did it twice. Once after 3 months, and then once after 6 months, asking exactly the same questions they asked before the program, to see if anything had changed. So this is one way to do it. Saad, I see your hand. I will give you the mic in a second. And the other way to do it is to have A/B testing. So basically, instead of doing something for your whole leadership population, you split it in at least two groups. And I think, Shreya, you've been in our behavior change program, so you know this already. And you address just one of the groups and see if that group has changed their behavior in any way whatsoever. So, what I would add to what you did, and it might be good to keep in mind maybe for next time, is to first of all, don't necessarily ask them about the program, but rather ask them about like the specific behaviors you're looking for them to change, and then ask them at the beginning as well, so you can have a benchmark.
Yes, we actually have it. Like we asked them before, we asked them after the program, but then like the idea is to ask them right now. But I believe that like what I might change is that I'm asking about all the competencies, that we've
Yeah,
been developing. Tell me about the performance management, tell me about
yeah,
resource management, tell me, So
yeah,
maybe it
yeah.
would make sense to ask specifically because now my form also it's like super long and it's not cool. Okay, super thank you. It
Yeah,
was super
yeah, yeah. And
insightful.
maybe some sort of 360 would also be good to make sure that, the answers are, of course, it's one thing for me to say that I'm very good at reflection. It's another thing for someone else to say it. Thank you. Saad, go ahead.
Yeah, it was a great conversation because you can look at self-rating, but we're moving towards looking at work artifacts. So if we're trying to help someone learn how to influence, and we find that let's say Shira and I are working on something actually right now. If you've got a go-to-market team where they have no positional influence and they work with multiple stakeholders, um, that don't report to them. We've got some colleagues who are perhaps over asserting. They're using a lot of rule books and guidelines to kind of get their point across. But that's not real influence. And what we're considering, and when I'm coaching them, I'm saying before the program, show me how you kind of write and how you influence, right? So because they're remote, we can often refer to work artifacts like emails. And so, okay, I can get a sense of your email style of writing and your tone. And then through the training, we can see how your style of influence and persuasion changes through how you write, because we often message in teams. What's really interesting is if you then look at it, it doesn't happen overnight. So we say, okay, we'll come back and do a follow-up in 3 months' time. We're almost asking learners to prepare like a portfolio of their work artifacts to say, can you select things that you think where you did really, really well and where you're not doing so great actually? And you can see the shift. And it might be that actually after 3 months there's been zero change, but that's where the accountability comes in, because that's where almost the real lesson starts at that 3 month follow up. And so it is an ongoing change. And if we think about like customer service reps, their emails are being scanned by AI right now to see if they've got the right tone, if they're listening, and that's actual work artifact in the flow, etc. So you could actually do it, because I think we focus a lot on behaviors, which in my opinion can sometimes be just a symptom. So how do we shift from behaviors, or alongside behaviors also look at results, which then finally brings me on to how we can couple leadership training with manager enablement, because it's like two sides of the same coin. So we're finding, for example, that let's say if you've got an events team and the sales team want a controversial speaker like a Nicki Minaj style person who is gonna be great to bring in the prospective customers, but you've got the events team who are saying actually this our music artist will get us good hype, but not all PR is good PR. Could we be a bit more risk focused when we come to our controversial speakers? So for that, there's no process on how we manage controversial speakers. So we put in a process, and typically L&D wouldn't do that, but we are starting to do that now. So we enable them. Now they're freed up to stop worrying about that process. They now, as a leader, can focus on being a leader and influencing. So there's a few things there around using work artifacts, but also how can we do more leadership manager enablement alongside the typical training.
Oh, I love that, Saad. First of all, I wanted to say that there's a question in the chat. If you can go, Kayla is asking you a question, just for the sake of time, if you can answer her in writing. but you're giving me such a perfect, and I promise that I didn't bring Saad here so he can give me a transition into the things that we would recommend. And again, it's not that we're recommending these, it's just gathered from a bunch of people who are trying things out and experimenting, and they seem to be successful in some areas. And before I go into the recommendations, what I would like to say is that it does seem like we need to admit that leadership development is right now at a crossroads, because one of the conversations that we have, at least in our community, is that, hey, we invest so much in leadership development. And in our research, we also asked about budgets and resources, like people allocated to leadership development. And I cannot tell you how much money we put into this, and yet we feel like we're not successful enough. So yeah, it's a tough place to be in, but the question, okay, how can we move forward? And again, these are like four things. It was really hard to choose four, but these are four things that we would advise. And the first one is exactly what Saad said, which is moving from leadership development to leadership enablement. And the question that I would change when we do like our needs assessment, our discovery research, however you want to call it, instead of asking them what are the skills that you want to develop, I would ask them, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing right now? Because most of the times, and we assume when we say leadership development, we assume that the biggest challenge leaders are facing is related to skills or behaviors, whereas the reality is that there are other areas in when it comes to leadership that might come in as blockers. For example, the processes that you have in place in your company for people management. Then the technology, and to give you an example for processes, it can be, how we recruit people, how we give them feedback, performance management, career development, all of these things. Are these things easy to follow for your leaders? Then the second thing, the technology that you're using. It doesn't need to, I'm not saying that, hey, we need to use like the most proficient technology out there. What I'm saying is is it easy for our leaders to use the technology that we have available to do their people management jobs? Another example when it comes to leadership enablement is about networking with their peers. One of the things that I read continuously everywhere in HBR and McKinsey, and I've seen it firsthand in my previous organization, is that at the top you will have like a split leadership, right? And that will like what will happen in your organization will mirror that. So leaders from different departments that maybe should work together or should know about each other never get a chance to be in the same room and collaborate and exchange ideas. So is there a way for you to create spaces where your leaders can network so that in the end they can also collaborate better? And the last thing I would mention about leadership enablement is something that I alluded to at the beginning, which is about strategy. How clear is it for your leaders, your company strategy? And one conversation that I recently had with an L&D team was that their like C-level execs were for months into like strategy discussions, and it seemed that for them their company strategy was very, very clear. But then what they did to communicate that company strategy was to send an email and just communicate it in one like company meeting. Let me tell you, if you don't know this already, but I bet you do know, that's not enough. The reason why these C-level execs understand their strategy so well was because they were for months in those discussions for creating the strategy. we need to, and we are in such a good position as L&D professionals to kind of become a I don't know, a link between what our leaders are saying, what our senior leaders are saying, and what all the other leadership levels understand. And this includes individual contributors as well, of course. But making sure that the leaders understand the company strategy is also extremely important. So this is like the first recommendation that we have. It's simple, just broaden your horizons and broaden your toolbox just by asking, instead of what skills do you want to develop or do you need to develop, ask what are the biggest challenges that you are facing, and just listen to them, ask follow-up questions. You might get some real interesting replies. Then the second thing is this shift from technical development to emotional development. And we've been having this conversation for quite a while, and it's about the fact that we tend to approach leadership development as a very technical role. Like, okay, we talk to new leaders about like the processes that they need to follow as people managers. We talk to them about all of these skills, but the reality is that when an individual goes from being an individual contributor to being a leader, and even when they go from being a manager of individuals to a manager of teams, there's also an identity shift that happens. And usually that identity shift also comes in with a lot of like emotional struggle. It comes in with, imposter syndrome and low confidence levels, because at the end of the day, we're still mostly working with humans, and working with humans it's not easy. Just imagine this scenario. I am, for example, an engineer. I think some of you will be from the tech environment, so I'm gonna give this use case. I'm an engineer. My whole career, what I've been doing was programming and maybe managing some projects, maybe. And then I become a team lead, right? That's a very common career path. And instead of just dealing with, programming and project management, I have all of these people that come to me with different challenges that are professional or personal. You know, I want a raise. Why don't I deserve a raise? I have personal issues, all sorts of personal issues. I want to develop my career. How do I develop my career? Like, all of these things are very hard emotionally on leaders. And I still feel like even in our workshops, because they're still very much content focused, we are not fully exploring the emotional torment that a human leader goes through in their role. So our second recommendation would be to make sure you listen to the signals when it comes to the emotional challenges that your leaders are going through. And to one of your points earlier, together with other leaders that are open to this, trying to create this safe space where leaders can share these challenges. Then the next thing is going from leadership development to team development. And the reason why we thought of putting this in here is because in leadership development programs, we often look at leaders as working in a vacuum, right? We have them with us in our programs, and we talk to them about, the processes that they need to change, the behaviors that they need to change. But at the end of the day, these leaders go back to their teams, and that the environment that their team is also providing can be a blocker or an enabler for how a leader reacts as well, right? So the question is, can we create a similar language in teams as well, so that a leader can also have this in enabling environment so that their team members understand where that leader is coming from, so that the leader develops and hence the team develops as well. And to give you a very real example, it was very interesting for me to hear the story from Spotify, where they have like the normal leadership development program, but they also offer as a complementary product or service in their L&D team, a team development program where leaders can come in with their teams to discuss different things that might need to change, for the leader to receive feedback, for the team to receive feedback as well. So yeah, can we do these two things complementary? And I would even argue that a team development program can be an in-house service if we don't have the budget for an external provider. Okay, and because of lack of time, I'm gonna move swiftly into the last recommendation. We didn't even, I swear to God, we're surrounded by AI, and we didn't even think about this until someone pointed it out more than one someone pointed it out very clearly in our research. And the fact is that in the future, we will know, or leaders will no longer manage just humans, they will also manage machines. And the question is, are you and are we preparing our leaders in any way to do this hybrid work where they manage humans that manage AI agents, but also manage AI agents themselves, right? So this is the reality, whether we want to accept it or not. And I'm not sure we're talking as much about it as we could. And this being said, I'm gonna shut up now. We still have 8 minutes. If you have any questions or thoughts, let's do like this little exercise again. Feel free to raise your hand or write in the chat any thoughts that you, or experiences. And meanwhile, what I can do, there's a lot of conversation happening in the chat, which is lovely. Ali says +1 for asking for the biggest challenges. Our client did this as part of their learning needs analysis before they engaged us. Awesome. And the post-program feedback was 100% of leaders said the program addressed the challenges they faced. It was our client's best scoring L&D program ever. Yoo-hoo! How do you find balance of creating small groups when you build trust and intimacy to open up versus large group for networking and peer learning? That's a really good point, and I think you can only learn the answer to this question through experimenting. What I would do in both cases is that I wouldn't make them mandatory. I think that's another thing that can slightly make the engagement drop, no matter if we talk about big or small groups. And just experiment. Don't start with like 10 groups. I was telling you about the case study that we just explored with Scott. He started with one group, just one group, and he learned a lot from that one and then scaled mostly through word of mouth to larger groups. And you can have some rituals as well. I really love this idea of rituals because it gives people it gives people recurrency and structure, which is something that we do need as humans. Every 3 months you can have leaders come together virtually or live or in different cities. It can be the same day for all the leaders in your organization, but in different cities. They can come together in a group of 5 drinking a beer, or in a group of 20 just networking in the office. So yeah, that's what I would advise. And now, just to wrap it up and make sure that we end on time, someone did ask about the presentation. You will receive the presentation as a follow-up. And the just like because you didn't seem to be familiar with our research, which is very interesting. But what we did is that we put together all the results of our research in a report that has, I think, around 70 or 80 pages, and you can explore it as an Offbeat fellow. And I have seen a few Offbeat fellows here. Let me share my screen. Okay, here you go. So as an Offbeat fellow, you have access to all the findings of our research in our platform, or you can download it as a PDF. And you'll see here, even how leadership principles are used, how leadership development programs are designed, who they're designed for, how they're measured, what kind of resources are being used, what are some successful stories, even more recommendations from us, and then of course more case studies from like real L&Ds, so no theory, just real practices that L&Ds are putting in place, and many actually curated resources, and also a series of leadership development canvases that you can just download and use while you prepare your strategy for leadership development in 2026 or even further ahead. And I will ask my colleague Ioana if she can drop a link to our Offbeat Fellowship if you want to learn more. This is what we do all day. We talk to L&Ds and we hear about their challenges, about their struggles, about their solutions and experiments. And we have a beautiful, beautiful community you can join and learn from if you're interested to do more of that, more of learning, I guess. Thank you so, so much for joining and for being so active in the chat. I will download the chat and I will send it as a follow-up as well. There were some really good nuggets there, and I will also share the presentation. Thank you for being with us, and have a good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world.